Star Trek books. They've been around for decades. Join us, the Trek ladies, Kavura and Jen, as we discuss the novels one at a time. Welcome to the Ladies Trek Library. Okay, and we are back again with Ladies Trek Library. This is Kavura, and I'm here with Jen. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Kavura, and hey, listeners. I'm happy to be back and talk about more Star Trek books.
Okay, so this time we have a book for Star Trek The Next Generation, Gulliver's Fugitives, published in 1990. Okay, Jen, you want to read the back of the book?
While searching for the USS Huxley, a starship missing for over 10 years, the Enterprise stumbles across a forgotten colony of humans on a planet called Rampart, a world where fiction, speculation, and works of the imagination are considered the ultimate crime. A survey team from the planet beams on board the Enterprise to search for contraband materials, and suddenly the crew find themselves plunged in the middle of a murderous civil war between a determined band of rebels and the planet's ruthless mine police. A civil war whose outcome will determine not only the future of the planet Rampart, but the life of Captain Jean-Luc Picard as well. Now, I will start off by saying that back description is maybe a bit of an exaggeration. It's not exactly a civil war that the Enterprise crew gets plunged into, maybe like a rebellion. Not exactly a civil war.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
but you know, they have to grab the reader in. So first I want to talk about the characterizations of the main characters. On the cover of this book, it's Picard and Troy, and then also some characters from the book. Troy is probably one of the central characters, central Star Trek characters. It's not an original character. As well as Picard and Wesley Crusher, and then to a lesser degree, Worf, Data, and Riker. What did you think about the characterizations of these established characters? Did you think that the author did a good job handling them? Did you feel like they were in character? Did you like their storylines?
I thought they were mostly in character, yes. I do like how it focused on Troy a lot. And the way she had to deal with seeing these visions and not knowing what it was, and they touched on it. You know, it's probably because she's empathic and seeing all of these characters and she doesn't know what they are for a long time. And so I do like how she was exploring that, and I like how Wesley Crusher, got to have another girlfriend. Now remember this, so this book was published in 1990, so probably written maybe during the second or third season of the show. And so Wesley was still that kid and, still trying to find himself. It was neat seeing him on a date in the holodeck and everything. And of course, he's still the one who came up with the idea that basically saved the ship. They had these machines called One Eyes that could read minds, and they sort of took over the ship, and they were kind of invulnerable because it was mentioned that you can't use your phaser on them because it would cause them to blow up. So they didn't want to damage the ship, so they didn't want to use phasers, so they had to think of something else. And Wesley, of course, was the genius who came up with the idea of doing some way to destroy them. And that's kind of like, I mean, it's consistent with the show, but it's also consistent with something I didn't like about this show because, Wesley, why does he have to be the one to save the ship when you have all these grown-ups who have already been through the academy? They're the ones who should be brilliant enough to come up with these ideas. But anyway, that was him.
I totally agree with you on that point. When I was reading those scenes, I thought, well, this is just like an episode of The Next Generation. But I always thought those episodes were like, it's the little genius kid who comes up with the idea, and not even Geordi or the adult engineers. But it fits since that's how it happened on the show. And what about some of the other characters like Picard and Worf, Data or Riker? Did any feelings about how they were characterized?
I thought they were okay. Yeah, I mean Picard, I thought Picard was in character, and then at the end, Troy was telling him how he still needs to work on expressing his emotions. I was kind of like I didn't really see that as a problem in the book. I mean, but it was something that came out. And when they erased Picard's mind, and he said he would, and of course he's gonna fight it, and it said he was thinking about he was just going through all of these memories in his head, trying to keep his memories so they couldn't erase his memories. It just reminded me because I just rewatched that Flash Gordon movie, and Dr. Zarkov, the same thing happened to him. They were trying to erase his mind, and he was thinking of all these things to try to keep his memories. So it just thought of that when it happened. And I do like how Riker was able to quote Shakespeare to bring Picard to sort of shake Picard's memory after they did erase Picard's mind, and Riker was trying to bring him out of it. Or actually, no, as Riker was trying to test Picard to make sure it was the real that Picard did have his memories back, instead of the other Picard who didn't have his memories but was still trying to command the Enterprise, trying to fool everyone. And it is neat that he wasn't able to fool them. Geordi could tell that it wasn't Picard. Like no, you don't sound like Picard with what you're saying. So that was a good touch by the writer.
Yeah, I agree. I think all of the established characters were really well done. They were really in character. Um, I Troy is one of my favorite characters, so I always love a book where Troy is the central character if it's well done. And I do feel like even though I had some issues with other parts of this book, that the way Troy was represented to me was very good. And it was clear that the writer, knew the characters well. Although interestingly enough, apparently this is the only Star Trek book that he's ever written, and I really couldn't find much else of what he wrote either. Um, so that kind of surprised me. And I meant to look it up in Voyages of the Imagination to see if there was some more info about the background on writing this story, and I totally forgot to do it. So,
Yeah, I
uh,
forgot too because yeah, because yeah, I kind of wanted to read more, but yeah, and I didn't know that this author wrote anything else. So I guess he didn't. Well, I mean, we know he didn't write any other Star Trek books.
yeah, and I couldn't really find that he'd written anything either. I mean, there's a number of Star Trek authors who maybe only wrote one or two Star Trek books, and then, they wrote for other fandoms, maybe Star Wars, other fandoms, or maybe just original science fiction and fantasy. But I really couldn't find anything about him. So that was kind of surprising. So maybe I'll have to research that, and in our next recording, we can go back and see if we found out anything interesting about this book.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, as far as the established characters, I think he did a really good job with them. One part that I really liked was I'm not like a huge Worf fan like some people are. I don't get really into the Klingon stuff, but there were some really good scenes with Worf where uh, these one eyes, these machines are trying to take over the Enterprise. And Wesley is trying to design this machine to fight them off, and other people are trying to, shoot them with various things. And Worf just is like, you know what? I'm just gonna like try to grab them and bang them together.
Yeah.
and and he sort of manages this plan where in the end he's able to, sort of trick them and get behind them and grab them and smash them up. And he kind of is like gleefully smashing one of them against the against the wall, and he sort of feels like, oh, I'm a warrior now. So it was I like those scenes. But in addition to the other to the established characters, there are really a lot of original characters in this book. So first we have Ensign Shikibu or Shikibu. I don't speak Japanese. I'm still not sure how to say that, but she is a security ensign um, who is an original character, and she's Wesley's love interest. We also have um, Dorothy Chops Taylor, who is a blind engineering officer who uses her hands to see. She has these gloves with sensors on them. And then we have two people who are traveling on the Enterprise, Olaf and Una, who are cultural envoys from what's called the First Federation. Now, there's also a bunch of original characters down on the planet that we'll get to in a minute. Um, but what did you think about these new characters that were on the Enterprise?
They were interesting. So like you had Shikibo. I mean, I kind of liked her just as Wesley's love interest, but as far as, she was good. I mean, I just like she was only in a few scenes. They said she likes archery. The one that was strange was Dorothy Taylor, the one they called Chops. And so she's supposed to be blind, and she has some kind of sensors on her fingers that allow her to see things, quote, see things, where she can touch something and her sensors tell her what it is. I mean, it was strange to add a character who was blind because we've already got Geordi, and I guess the author wanted to put in something, like here's another way that technology could address someone who can't see. I mean, maybe this is an idea that the author had for another story with a blind character, and he really wanted to use it in this book or something. But it was good that she was an engineer. I like how she worked with Geordi, and she seemed very smart. So all of that was good. I just thought it's kind of redundant to have another blind character. And then with Olaf and Una, and of course you have to say, like, well, first of all, a character named Una, and now that's a character on Strange New Worlds, and it's been used, yeah, and it's been used in the books as the name of number one, which is what, that's who she is on Strange New Worlds. But anyway, so yeah, Olaf and Una are a couple from the First Federation, which was Balok's race in the Corbomite maneuver. So at least, yeah, yeah, I mean, it was neat to see them again and have these familiar, like a familiar race. And the book even says that they're short people, just like Balak was. They look like children. And so there was a funny scene where the two of them are kissing, and Riker sees them and he thinks they're kids. Like, why are these kids kissing? That's just so inappropriate. But then he finds out, oh, it's our guests. Okay. Um, yeah, yeah. So and it was interesting, and what they do in the story. That it was interesting characters. I mean, it's kind of like the way that they're tied into to what's going on in the book as far as the fictional characters and being historical characters. It was almost too coincidental the way it happened. Like what they put something in Troy's mind that she didn't know about. It was all an accident about the history of Earth, and then they just happened to be on a planet where all of these fictional characters are not allowed. That was a strange coincidence. So the author just sort of had to throw it in to make the two things relate, is the way I saw it.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to the characters on the Rampart in a minute. But getting back to what you said about those the characters that are on the Enterprise, I liked Ensign Shikibu. She wasn't. We didn't really get to learn too much about her other than that she's interested in this sort of type of Zen archery, which ends up being helpful to disabling these one-eye machines that are taking over the Enterprise because the one-eye machines can read your mind, and she's mastered the technique of being able to sort of just shoot from instinct without thinking about it. Um, I don't. I mean, and I guess Wesley's love interest. To me, it was a little. I didn't really need to have that part in there, but okay, it didn't bother me.
Yeah, I think it was to
Um,
have some downtime in the book. Yeah.
yeah. But I agree with Ensign Chops Taylor. I mean, you have a big chunk of the book is taking place in the engineering section with Geordi and Chops, and I thought either they needed okay, they could have had some engineering characters, but you have to make another blind one. It was a little weird,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
two blind engineers, um, and then they make a point of talking about how uh, she had a very weird backstory too, which I thought was unnecessary and just kind of and there are some other elements in this book that I thought were very bizarre and really didn't need to be included, which I'll talk about later. But she had this weird backstory where she was like some aliens had taken human DNA and were trying to make humans as part of a science experiment, and she was the result, and because they didn't do it well, she ended up being blind. And I thought it was kind of like just drop in this strange background, rather than just saying, hey, here's a new character. They have to give us this weird backstory. I don't know. But And then we have Olaf and Una, who are, as you said, from the First Federation. So that was kind of neat to see characters from that race again. And they weren't in it a great deal, but they were kind of mysterious. And the beginning part of the book leads you to believe that maybe they aren't so innocent as they appear. It seems that they have a secret that they're keeping with Worf, and also that they're hiding something from Troy. And so that may, makes you leads you to believe that maybe what's going on the planet Rampart below, maybe they have some sort of connection to that. Um,
Yeah, that's what they try to make you think. Yeah.
yeah, which turns out not to be the case, but it was kind of an interesting little way to lead you on in the wrong direction. But I do agree. Yes, it's a little weird that you have these two envoys from the First Federation, and they are ethnographers. So they go to different worlds and record culture and history and mythology. And it just so happens that the Enterprise, ends up going to this planet where imagination, mythology, and all of that is banned. So
Yes.
what a coincidence. But let's get on to the planet Rampart. So on the planet Rampart, we have um, the the government is established in this building called CEFCOM, and it's the men and women there are part of this. They're called CS, Cephalic Security, and the main characters there are Crichton and Ferris. And then we also have the dissenters, who are people who are, they object to this government, which is sort of like 1984 in some ways with the brainwashing. Um, People who uh, have any sort of imagination or believe anything that they think is fictional, they call it the Allpox, and they wipe people's minds if they think they've been infected with the Allpox. So the dissenters are objecting to that, and the group of dissenters that we get to know, because we learn there are several groups, is a group that's living underground in some caves. And these characters all have named themselves after famous fictional characters from history. So we have like Odysseus, Rhiannon, um, various characters from different cultures.
Yeah, I love that they pick their own names from literature.
Yes. And also tied with these dissenters are a magical creature. Well, I don't know that they're magical, but a creature that doesn't exist on Earth called the Haguyas, which are sort of like dragons, but they don't breathe fire, I guess, how you could describe them, like flying reptile sort of things.
Yeah, that's how
So
I pictured it. Yeah.
yeah. So what did you think about the characters in CEFCOM, the CS officers, and the dissenters and the Haguyas? How did you think all that fit in, and did the author do a good job with it?
Well, the syphilic security officers were just the common stereotypes, the hardcore military officers who do their job in enforcing what they're supposed to. And of course, they were very abrasive and very single-minded, wouldn't listen to anyone, and it's just the stock characters that you would expect there. And of course, we do find out a little more about especially about Crichton later. But that's how they are. And so, but the dissenters I liked. I mean, they were very of course, they seemed nice. They took care of Deanna Troy, and I like the fact that Rhiannon was the little girl who was the innocent one and really seemed to like Deanna, and the fact that they do embrace stories, and this is well, this is more like we would embrace stories, and so we do relate more to these dissenters. And the character of Odysseus, saying that he liked Deanna Troy and kind of like wanted to marry her or whatever, that seemed a little bit off the wall. I mean, I thought that part came out of nowhere, saying that he liked her that much, and Rhiannon also told Deanna, well, I think Odysseus likes you, but it still seemed kind of, they didn't drop enough hints in the book to me, because I just, like, to where just didn't see that coming. And of course Deanna has to let him down nicely, but also let him be. Of course, she mentions, or she was thinking, she has to, since he's the leader, she wants to build him up, so she uses her skills to encourage him when he starts having doubts. So in that way, he's a very human character. He's very relatable. He's the leader who still can be unsure at times. And the Haguyas, they were neat too. So they were these flying creatures, and of course, kind of like a pet to Rhiannon, but they also show up later to help rescue them. It was strange that they are like only seen by the dissenters at first, and they've existed all this time, and the other people, the security people, the regular citizens of the planet, like, they don't believe in these creatures, but the creatures are right there on the planet. It seems like they would have seen them before.
Well, remember they do talk about that a little bit because they, the this on this planet Rampart, there is something it's not the Bible, but it's like their Bible, which talks about what is fact, and they believe everything in this book is fact, and if it's not in there, unless it can be proven, then it's fantasy. And a lot of people wear these helmets that filter out so that they can't see or hear fiction. So it did mention that when some people had seen the Huguyas and reported this, that then their minds were cleansed.
Okay, they
So
always wipe it out. Yeah.
yeah, but I agree. Like it didn't make a whole lot of sense because it did say that if something could be proven, then they would add it to this book to make it fact. So it seems like, there'd be enough information to prove that these creatures exist. Although they did say a lot of times they were hiding in these caves. And the other thing that kind of didn't make sense, along with that, is these people were originally from Earth. Their ancestors had come from Earth. So obviously they arrived on a spaceship, and even when Enterprise first makes contact with Crichton and Ferris, they know that their ancestors had come from Earth. They said that they came to avoid the Allpox, which is the disease that they believe is, causes fantasy and imagination. So they obviously knew that, people could travel by space, and they had starships that were orbiting the planet. So it seemed to me that they, the idea that they didn't believe some of these other things, like they didn't believe in aliens, their helmet filtered out things, or they would try to deny. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
I
Um,
agree. Yeah, I noticed that too. These are spacefaring people, even though they don't really, so they don't go as far as leaving their planet. They just orbit the planet and don't go farther than that. But yeah, since we know that they came from Earth, and in Star Trek world, well, aliens are a fact. And I kind of had the thought maybe the writer is trying to associate it with people now who don't believe in UFOs. We have people now who might not believe in people from outer space. So maybe they're trying to say that, that UFOs are in the same category as stories, things that are made up. But in the Star Trek universe, the aliens are not made up. They do exist. But yeah, but so it was strange that these people on this planet wouldn't believe in people from outer space.
yeah, but I can see what you're saying. It could be that maybe they only believed humans existed and everything else was fantasy. Um, so that could be it. But also, just I thought about the Haguyas, the fact that if they know that, they as humans are not native to the planet, then you would think that they might say, hey, this is a different planet than our ancestors originated from, so it's going to have different species than where we came from.
Yeah, couldn't it
Um,
be seen as just as an animal? It's a different type of animal, like just that, like there are so many animals on Earth.
right. Yeah, so that was one of the issues that I had with that. Um, And I agree that the characters that the CS characters were just sort of stereotypical. A lot of them had their minds blanked or cleansed regularly, so they really weren't capable of any sort of independent thought. And then in contract, we have the dissenters who've all chosen to model their lives after these different fictional characters. And we have the leader is, Odysseus, and he tries to present himself just like the ancient Odysseus from legend was. And I thought that was really interesting, and people took cultures from their own story. So there was, the group of dissenters included people whose ancestors came from all over the earth. So we had, a character who took on a persona of a Native American mythological person, and another one a Native Australian, and there was the African twins who took on the persona of some twins from African mythology. So I thought that part was all pretty interesting, even though I didn't know that it was necessarily believable that all this literature still existed. Um, but I do agree with you about the, and that was there were parts of this book that just didn't seem to fit, and several of them involved romantic and sexual things, which just seemed very out of place. So we have the Wesley love interest with Ensign Shikibu, which on its own could have been fine. Nothing. They had some dates in the holodeck. It was all very innocent. But there are scenes where they have kind of like Wesley having these sexual fantasies about her, which just like we're kind of like, what is this doing in the book? Like
Yeah.
I didn't need to know what Wesley's sexual fantasy is. And then the same thing happens with Troy when she goes down to the planet and she falls in with the dissenters. She mentions at one point where they're living in these caves and they're sleeping in the caves, and the book mentions that Troy thinks some of them are having sex. And then all of a sudden she goes to talk to Odysseus, and he's kind of like coming on to her in what to me seemed like a creepy way for having just met her. And it wasn't innocent at all. It was just like weird sexualization that didn't really fit in. Um, so then it moves on, and the character is fleshed out a bit more, but I did think that part was weird.
Mhm. What was funny was what Wesley was thinking. I mean, somehow he was thinking about Shikibu, but then he started thinking about the Rampartians and about how they express love, and he said they probably say something. I forgot the exact words, but he said they probably say things like "You make my temperature rise," or it was something silly, because he was thinking they probably can't express love since they don't have literature for some reason. So, and it made me think of Vulcans. Like that's probably more of what the Vulcans would say.
I thought the exact same thing when I was reading it. Yeah, Wesley was
Yeah.
having some little fantasies, and he thought, oh, how do people who don't believe in imagination express love? And it seemed like those little jokes you see people on, Star Trek sites. I think I may have even seen some Vulcan Valentine cards that, it's trying to logically express your love for
Yeah.
someone. It's pretty funny. Um, but, so what did you think about this concept of the Allpox, which is, the supposed disease of fantasy, and, anytime by the way, we have these machines that are called the One Eyes, which not only are trying to take over the Enterprise, but which are all over the planet and which can read people's minds, so that if people think about anything fictional, it reports them and their mind can be cleansed. And there's different types of cleansings we learn. You can have like a little, just have the fantasies removed. Some people who are like the dissenters who've committed some more serious mind crimes might have their whole minds wiped. And then other people may actually just be killed. For example, they said that if the mind wipe doesn't work, then they usually just kill the person rather than trying to wipe their mind again. What did you think about this concept of the Allpox? Was it believable?
Um, yeah, it was very extreme in this book. And now, first of all, even calling it all pox, and So they're saying it's just the idea that they don't believe people should read stories. They don't think that any of it should be taken, or it should not be consumed at all. The fact that they call it the Allpox, I guess that's supposed to show how seriously they take it, like they consider it a disease. That is, yeah, that is just so out there to me that they would even have it, to think of it in that extreme way. And so they had to have gotten the author must have tried to say, like, this is Star Trek's take on Fahrenheit 451, and I kind of see that, they didn't exactly, I don't think they burned books in this, but they banned books in this story. So you can say it was believable, but it still seems like, but you can see how, as a society, that the way they functioned was just so militaristic, and it seems like the security, like that's all they did all the time was finding people who had these thoughts and erasing their minds. I mean, they had to spend so much time on it because it's just such an extreme thing to do to people.
Yeah, I don't know that I had a hard time kind of buying that. In some ways, it was like 1984, with this, all controlling government that knows everything you're doing. But it was a little different because these machines can read your mind. And unlike 1984, which was, you know, the people working for the government were inventing fiction because they didn't want people to know what the truth was. This is kind of the opposite. Um, so I don't know how well I bought the idea of that they believed that thinking thoughts about fantasy or imagination was a disease that needed to be eradicated from your mind to the point where it controls the whole society, and you have one thought and the machine picks up on it, and that's it. Your mind is cleansed or wiped, and you know um I don't know. It was kind of a tough sell on me. I think the author did a good job once we got onto the planet, but still, I just kind of found it was just a little difficult concept to believe.
Yeah, it was out there.
So and then we already talked a little bit about, how some of the stuff in the storyline that I personally didn't think fit in exactly. And I can think of another scene where um, the Picard is kidnapped and taken down to the planet Rampart, and they're going to wipe his mind. And he tries to convince the woman who's about to do it not to wipe his mind. And suddenly, this she sort of has this weird conversation with him that comes out of nowhere, and he starts saying weird stuff too. And that didn't really fit either for me. Is there anything you didn't think fit in, or did you think things, was everything fit well? How did you feel about that?
Um, yeah, we've discussed some plot points that seemed a little odd. What I wanted what I really think about this is just the whole idea. I mean, like, of not of or of, say, not letting people have an imagination or read stories. And what the book is missing, though, is like explaining the philosophical ideas. As I mentioned in Fahrenheit 451, they talked about the dangers of a society where you're not allowed to read books. In this book, they don't address it as much. It's more of an action story, really. So that, like, we didn't really get to hear the side of, like, say, a civilian who is for the way that they do things, and someone who could just say, well, if you read stories, that's going to cause chaos, or something, just someone to give their ideas. That So they really didn't have this in the book. It's like it's addressed. I mean, the reader is going through this thinking, yeah, it's pretty obvious that what they're doing is wrong, except for the dissenters. So in that way, it's not as much of a Star Trek book because they don't address the idea as much. It's like, oh, it's just obvious that they are wrong. So that's kind of what I think, that that should have been addressed more in the book.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I have not read Fahrenheit 451. Um, but, in Star Trek especially, and in science fiction, usually you get both sides of the issue. And, Star Trek always presented something of showing you both sides without being upfront and saying, yeah, this is the good side and this is the bad side. Sometimes it wasn't clear. And you always got the perspective from both sides, and then you kind of had to decide what's right and what's wrong, or is one right and wrong, or is it just a gray area? And they there was really no explanation as far as why this society had developed this way. All we know is that they left planet Earth because they didn't, they feared the Allpox and they wanted to start a new society without this, what they viewed as a disease. But it's not really discussed in any kind of detail. It is mostly an action book. So in that sense, to me, it wasn't as much like a Star Trek book. It was more like the Star Trek characters are sort of caught in danger on a kind of a bad planet, but we don't really know the moral or the moral side to their story.
Hmm.
So I agree with you on that. And then we do have one part of the book. So as we're nearing the end of the book, it starts to really get climactic, and we have a scene where Troy, along with the other members of the Enterprise who have been captured, um, Captain Picard and Riker, and am I missing anyone? Picard, Riker, and Data,
Yeah.
um, who they've been captured, and SEFCOM has determined that they're to be executed. So they are sort of being marched out to their execution when we have all these. Oh, and we haven't really talked about, we haven't really laid out chronologically how this story is taking place, but what's happening from the beginning is that Troy has been having these experiences that she believes is contact with aliens who are maybe in another dimension. Um, and these aliens are very strange, and she keeps having these weird experiences. And she picks up through her empathic abilities that Crichton, one of the CS men, has had contact with these aliens as well. So she, as they're being led to their execution, some of these aliens that she had this experience with um, come to their rescue, and Troy realizes that these are not really aliens, but they are mythological creatures from different human um, cultures, uh, including Odysseus, but not Odysseus the Dissenter, the actual Odysseus, as well as characters like Sir Gawain and pretty much anyone you can think from mythology. And they all come to the rescue of Troy and her crewmates. Um, and so you're kind of led along thinking, oh, wow, this is interesting. And then we think the, book's ending that it's, the mythological creatures have freed Troy and her crew. And then we realize that Troy just kind of fainted and had this was like a vision that she had while she was unconscious. And, and the book didn't really end, and it keeps going on. What did you think about that? Did you know that this was something going on inside her head, or did you really, think that the book was ending here?
Yeah, that was strange too. Well, I mean, I thought it was a good scene, first of all, just showing that, like, oh, now this is happening, because Troy had been seeing these, as she called them, otherworlders. She had been seeing them several times during the book, and then all of a sudden they all break it. It's like they break out, and now they're in the real world, as she thought. And yeah, I did kind of think like that was going to be like the big climax of the book. Yeah, because that seems like that's what it was meant to be. It's what it looked like. But yeah, and then it turned out that this was something in her mind. It was kind of a letdown, but I guess that's the only way the book could have done it. But yeah, it would have been neat to see all the mythological characters wreak havoc on the people in the book who didn't believe in them. That would have been neat. Um, but one interesting thing too was when Troy kept seeing these other worlders, she said she could sense them, so she knew that they were actually real creatures. But then it turned out that they weren't. We find out that they actually were in her mind. That had to do with Una and Elif showing her the stories they had collected from Earth. So that was interesting that they weren't real, but she had said that she sensed them. So and the book doesn't really explain that, but I kind of figured out it must be it's just like when you have a hallucination, when you see something that's not there, but what if it's a hallucination, it is real to you. You do see it because your mind perceives it. So that must have been like they've never addressed that Troy's empathic abilities could be that way, where she could empathically sense something that isn't there, just the way sometimes our minds work where we see something that isn't there.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting because throughout the book you know, the book kind of actually starts off with Troy having this experience with these other worlders and not knowing what the connection is between them and the people living on the planet Rampart. They're because they're not physical beings; they're kind of like in another dimension. So as I was reading it, I thought, oh yeah, this is, I build you up to the climax, and you're reading all this, and then you find out, oh, it was just kind of in her dream. And there have been, I mean, many stories and television shows where you have, you think something is ending, and then you find out it's all a dream.
Yeah, it was a
um,
letdown. Yeah.
yeah. So it was a bit of a letdown. And it reminded me of there's this is an old story. It's called An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge by Ambrose Bierce. I don't know if you ever read this. I had to read it in
No.
school. Like it was a short story published in 1890. But I immediately thought of this short story when I saw that read this because it's very similar where someone you go through this whole story with the person thinking all these things are happening only to realize at the end of the story this was all in the person's mind and it didn't actually happen and you take them back to reality. So um but I kind of liked how it was done. But yeah, it was a little weird, the explanation that these creatures that Troy had been having these experiences with um, turned out to not be creatures at all, but turned out to be that Olaf and Una had said in their collecting stories from Earth, they had made a video and they warned her that some people, if you watch the video, it like gets implanted in your mind and it causes you to have these um, visions or hallucinations where you think these stories really happened. And, so she, decides anyway she wants to see the movie regardless of the consequences. And of course, that's what happens to her. And not only that, but because of the events were sort of traumatic for her, she sort of blocks out um, the whole incident where she even was with Olaf and Una and saw the movie in the first place. So
Yeah.
she's not
How
even able to
convenient. Yeah.
recognize, right? So she can't be like, oh yeah, these are just the hallucinations they told me would be a side effect. Like she does. So that was a little like, okay. Um,
Yeah,
don't
so
know if
some
I,
things in the story were not really explained as well, or they seem too like or too easy. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so overall, what did you think about this book? Would you recommend it or not?
I mean yeah, even though I had problems with it, I still liked it. I mean, I think it was like so when I was reading this book, it kept my attention, and I did like some things about it. I like the focus on Troy and her time with the dissenters. Most of that was good, and so I would still say it was good, even though like from what we've said, so the listeners can decide if you want to read it. It might not be for you, but I think it's not up there with the best of the Star Trek books, but I think I would still recommend it.
So how many Quatloos would you give it?
I'll say 3 out of 5.
Yeah, I was gonna give it 3 out of 5 Quatloos also. I pretty much have the same thoughts. If you've got a limited amount of time, this is not in the top, 10 or whatever, Star Trek, even top 25, I'd say Star Trek books out there. But it's not bad, because we know some of them aren't really good. I think the characterizations are very good. I really like it as a Troy-centric story. The plot kept me interested, so it wasn't one where, sometimes you're reading them and you feel like, oh, I just have to force myself to keep reading because it's just not interesting or it's just so badly written. And that wasn't the case here. It really, it moved you along. Did have some weird stuff in it, but overall, I think I'd give it 3 out of 5 Quatloos. And I'd say if you're a fan of Troy and you like Troy-centric stories, that this is probably a good one to read.
Okay, great. So that's the end. So we'll see everyone next time.
Yeah, we'll see everyone next time when we will be discussing Enterprise: The First Adventure by Vonda McIntyre.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.